The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, and I knew before opening it that my life was about to get complicated again. My name is Ethan Olsen, and I had been living in the Riverside Meadows subdivision in Minneapolis, Minnesota, for 3 years. 3 years of relative peace, if you ignored the occasional passive-aggressive notes about keeping my trash bins exactly perpendicular to the curb. But this letter felt different. The envelope was thicker than usual, the paper stock more expensive. Someone wanted to make an impression. I tore it open while standing in my kitchen, coffee growing cold on the counter. The header read Mandatory Snow Removal Service Agreement in bold, official-looking font. My eyes skipped down the page, catching phrases like community standards, approved vendor, and non-negotiable compliance. The gist was simple. Effective immediately, all homeowners were required to contract with Clear Path Snow Services for all winter snow removal needs. Any homeowner found using alternative services or removing snow themselves would face fines starting at $500 per incident. The letter was signed by Regina Vanderbilt, our HOA president. Of course it was. I had met Regina exactly twice since moving in. The first time was at a neighborhood barbecue where she spent 20 minutes explaining why my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. The second was when she knocked on my door to inform me that my Halloween decorations were garish and detracted from property values. I had a single plastic pumpkin on my porch. I read the letter again, slower this time. The mandatory service would cost $350 per season, automatically charged to each homeowner's HOA account. Failure to pay would result in a lien against the property. I pulled out my phone and called my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 2 doors down. "Did you get the snow removal thing?" I asked when he picked up. "Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. This is insane, right? I have a snowblower. I've been doing my own driveway for 15 years. Can they actually enforce this? I have no idea. I'm reading through the HOA bylaws now. Hold on." I heard papers rustling. Okay, there's a section here about maintenance standards, but it's vague. Says the board can implement reasonable measures to ensure uniform property upkeep. Whether mandatory snow service counts as reasonable, that's debatable. Who's Clear Path Snow Services? Never heard of them. Want me to look them up, please? I waited while Marcus typed. He was a software engineer who worked from home, which meant he had both the time and inclination to dive deep into research rabbit holes. It was one of the things I appreciated about him. "Okay, this is interesting," Marcus said. "Clear Path was incorporated 6 months ago. The registered agent is, hold on, Daniel Vanderbilt. Any relation to Regina?" My grip tightened on the phone. "Has to be. That's too much of a coincidence." "Yeah. So she's basically forcing everyone to use her husband's company. That smells like a conflict of interest, or fraud. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, but you should definitely push back on this." I told Marcus I would think about it and hung up. Through my kitchen window, I could see the October leaves scattered across my lawn. Winter was coming fast in Minnesota. We typically got our first significant snow in early November, and by December, the real storms hit. If I was going to fight this, I needed to move quickly. That evening, I drafted an email to the HOA board. I kept it polite but firm. I noted the apparent conflict of interest with Regina's husband owning the mandatory service provider. I requested documentation showing how this decision was voted on and whether proper procedures were followed. I asked for clarification on the consequences of opting out. I ended by stating that I intended to continue handling my own snow removal unless provided with compelling justification otherwise. I received a response within an hour. It was from Regina herself. "Mr. Olsen, Your concerns have been noted. However, the board's decision is final. The mandatory snow service requirement was approved by a majority vote in accordance with our governing documents. As for the supposed conflict of interest, I assure you that everything has been properly disclosed and vetted by our legal counsel. Clear Path was selected because they offered the most competitive bid and highest quality service. The fact that my husband owns the company is irrelevant to its qualifications. You are expected to comply with this requirement like every other homeowner in Riverside Meadows. Failure to do so will result in fines as outlined in the notice. Regards, Regina Vanderbilt, HOA President. The email's tone made my jaw clench. I showed it to my girlfriend, Rachel, when she came over later that night. "She's definitely hiding something," Rachel said, scrolling through the message on my laptop. "Nobody gets this defensive unless they're covering their tracks." Rachel Voss was an accountant, sharp and detail-oriented. We had been dating for about a year, and she had heard plenty about Regina's antics. Rachel lived in a different part of Minneapolis without an HOA, which made her objectively smarter than me. "What do you think I should do?" "Document everything. If they're running a scam, you'll need evidence. Also, check the HOA bylaws yourself. Don't just take their word that this is legal." I spent the next 3 days diving into the Riverside Meadows HOA governing documents. The original bylaws were filed in 2005 when the subdivision was first developed. They were dense, full of legalese, but not impossible to parse. I found the section about maintenance standards that Marcus had mentioned. It did give the board broad authority to implement community-wide requirements for property upkeep. But there was a catch. Any requirement that imposed a financial obligation on homeowners exceeding $200 annually required a vote by the full membership, not just the board. $350 definitely exceeded $200. I had found my angle. I forwarded the relevant section to Marcus and asked him to spread the word. Within 2 days, I had a group of 7 homeowners ready to challenge the snow removal mandate. We called ourselves the Riverside Resistance, though only ironically. Most of us were just regular people who didn't like being pushed around. On November 1st, the first snow fell. It was light, barely an inch, but enough to coat driveways and sidewalks. I grabbed my shovel at 6 in the morning and cleared my driveway before heading to work. I took photos with timestamps showing my cleared driveway and clean sidewalks. By the time I got home that evening, there was an envelope tucked into my door. Another letter from Regina. "Dear Mr. Olsen, it has come to our attention that you removed snow from your property this morning in violation of the mandatory snow service agreement. As per the terms outlined in our previous correspondence, you are hereby fined $500. Payment is due within 30 days. Future violations will result in additional fines and potential legal action. Regards, Regina Vanderbilt, HOA President. $500 for shoveling my own driveway." I took a photo of the letter and posted it in our neighborhood Facebook group. The response was immediate and divided. About half the commenters thought the HOA was overreaching. The other half accused me of being a troublemaker who refused to follow rules. One comment stood out. It was from Jennifer Hartley, who lived on the opposite side of the subdivision. "Did Clear Path even come to your street today?" Because they never showed up on mine. My driveway still had snow at 4 o'clock when I got home. I messaged Jennifer directly. "Are you saying Clear Path didn't service your property?" "Not once. I ended up shoveling it myself around dinner time." I'm not paying $350 for a service that doesn't show up. This was interesting. Very interesting. I reached out to the other 6 homeowners in our resistance group. 3 of them reported similar experiences. Clear Path had not serviced their properties during the November 1st snowfall, yet we were all being charged for the season. I decided to set a trap. Minnesota winters are predictable in their unpredictability. The weather forecast called for significant snow on November 8th. I prepared carefully. I borrowed a security camera from Rachel and set it up in my front window, angled to capture my entire driveway and the street. The camera had a timestamp feature and could record continuously for 48 hours on its memory card. I also printed out copies of the HOA bylaws, highlighting the section about membership votes for financial obligations. I packaged everything together with my documentation of the conflict of interest between Regina and her husband's company. November 8th arrived with heavy gray skies. Snow started falling around 10 in the morning. I worked from home that day, watching through my window as the white powder accumulated. By noon, there were 4 inches on the ground. By 3 o'clock, 7 inches. It was a proper Minnesota snowstorm. I watched my driveway carefully. No Clear Path truck appeared. No workers with shovels or snowblowers. Nothing. At 5:30 after sunset, my driveway remained buried under nearly 8 inches of snow. The security camera had captured the entire day. I backed up the footage to my computer, made 3 copies on separate USB drives, and uploaded one version to cloud storage. Then I grabbed my shovel and cleared the driveway myself. It took 45 minutes in the freezing darkness. My back ached and my fingers were numb by the time I finished, but it was worth it. I had proof. The next morning, another envelope appeared at my door. Another $500 fine for unauthorized snow removal. But this time, I had leverage. I scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting, which according to the bylaws, any homeowner could request with 48 hours notice. Regina tried to deny my request via email, but I cited the exact bylaw section that granted me this right. She had no choice but to schedule it. The meeting was set for November 12th at 7 p.m. in the subdivision's community center. I spent the intervening days preparing my presentation. Rachel helped me organize everything into a clear, logical argument. Marcus created a simple PowerPoint to display the video footage. The night of the meeting, the community center's main room was packed. Word had spread about the confrontation. At least 40 homeowners showed up, far more than typically attended board meetings. Regina sat at the front table with the other 4 board members, Todd Patterson, Susan Delmer, Gregory Walsh, and Deanne Kelso. Regina's expression was tight and controlled when I walked in. "Let's get this started," Regina said sharply at 7 p.m. "Mr. Olsen has requested this meeting to discuss the snow removal service requirement. You have 15 minutes. Actually, the bylaws say I have 30 minutes for my presentation, plus time for questions," I corrected her. Regina's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Fine. 30 minutes." I stood and connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide showed the mandatory snow service letter. 3 weeks ago, every homeowner received this letter requiring us to use Clear Path snow services. The letter stated this was non-negotiable and that using alternative services would result in fines. The cost is $350 per season. I advanced to the next slide, which showed the HOA bylaws. However, according to Section 7, Article 3 of our governing documents, any requirement that imposes a financial obligation exceeding $200 annually must be voted on by the full membership. The board cannot unilaterally impose such a requirement. Regina leaned forward. The board has the authority to implement maintenance standards under Section 4. Section 4 covers aesthetic standards like lawn height and fence colors. It doesn't override the financial obligation threshold in Section 7, but let's put that aside for a moment. I clicked to the next slide, which showed the business registration for Clear Path Snow Services. Clear Path is owned by Daniel Vanderbilt, Regina's husband. This is a clear conflict of interest. Regina is using her position to funnel money to her family's business. The room erupted in murmurs. Regina stood abruptly. That's a baseless accusation. Clear Path was selected through a competitive bidding process. Then show us the other bids, I said calmly. Show us the documentation of this competitive process. Regina's face flushed red. We're not required to disclose internal deliberations. Actually, homeowners have the right to review board decisions that affect their financial obligations. But again, let's move on. I advanced to the next slide. Here's the bigger issue. Clear Path isn't actually providing the service we're paying for. I played the video footage from November 8th. The timestamp in the corner showed the entire day, sped up to compress hours into minutes. Snow accumulated steadily on my driveway. No service truck appeared. By evening, my driveway was buried. This is footage from the last major snowfall. As you can see, Clear Path never showed up to service my property. I've spoken with multiple other homeowners who report the same experience. I gestured to Jennifer and Marcus in the audience. They both nodded. We're being charged for a service that isn't being delivered. Regina was on her feet again. One incident doesn't prove anything. Maybe your property was missed by accident. It wasn't just one incident. I clicked through several more slides, showing testimony from other homeowners. 8 people had reported non-service so far, spread across different streets throughout the subdivision. Clear Path has failed to service multiple properties on multiple occasions. Yet you're collecting payments from everyone and threatening fines if we take care of our own snow removal. Todd Patterson, one of the other board members, looked uncomfortable. Regina, did you verify that Clear Path actually has the capacity to service all 200 properties in our subdivision? Of course they do. They assured me they had adequate equipment and staff. But have you verified it? Todd pressed. Have you done site visits? Checked their work? Regina's silence was damning. Susan Delmer, another board member, spoke up. I think we need to table this requirement until we can conduct a proper review. This is clearly more complicated than we thought. We can't just back down because one troublemaker throws a tantrum, Regina snapped. The room went quiet. I saw several homeowners exchange glances. Regina seemed to realize she had overstepped. What I mean, she continued, her tone forced into something calmer, is that we made this decision in the best interest of the community. Uniform snow removal creates consistency and maintains property values. We can't have some properties cleared and others neglected. But properties are being neglected, I said, by the company you're forcing us to use, the company owned by your husband. Gregory Walsh cleared his throat. I think we need to call for a formal vote. All those in favor of suspending the mandatory snow service requirement pending further review. Todd, Susan, and Gregory raised their hands. That was 3 votes out of 5. Deanne Kelso looked between Regina and the others, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Finally, reluctantly, she raised her hand as well, 4-1. The requirement was suspended. Regina's face went white, then red. This is a mistake. You're going to regret this. We'll schedule a full membership meeting to discuss this properly, Gregory said. In accordance with the bylaws, that's how this should have been done in the first place. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations. Several homeowners approached me to share their own stories of Clear Path not showing up. Others thanked me for pushing back against Regina's overreach. I noticed Regina speaking urgently with her husband Daniel near the door. He was a tall man with thinning hair and an expensive suit. They both looked angry. As I was packing up my laptop, Rachel appeared beside me. "You did great, but Regina's going to come after you now. You know that, right?" "Yeah, I know." Over the next week, I received 3 more letters from the HOA. The first demanded payment of the two $500 fines for unauthorized snow removal. The second notified me of a special assessment for $200 to cover legal consultation fees. The third cited me for having my trash bins visible from the street for more than 12 hours, a violation I was certain half the neighborhood committed weekly without consequence. It was clear Regina was retaliating, but I wasn't alone. Marcus received similar harassment letters. So did Jennifer. The board's other members started pushing back against Regina's increasingly erratic behavior. Then things got interesting. On November 20th, I received a call from someone named Patricia Monroe. She identified herself as a former employee of Clear Path Snow Services. "I saw the news coverage about your HOA dispute," Patricia said. "I worked for Clear Path for 3 weeks in October. I quit because of what I saw." "What did you see?" "They don't have the equipment or staff to service 200 properties. Daniel Vanderbilt bought 2 used plow trucks and hired 4 workers total. There's no way they can handle the contract, but Daniel told us to prioritize the streets where board members live and ignore the rest unless we got complaints." My pulse quickened. "Would you be willing to testify to that?" "Testify, like in court, maybe. I'm not sure yet how far this will go, but your testimony could be important." Patricia hesitated. "I don't want to get sued." "I understand. But if what you're saying is true, Daniel and Regina are committing fraud. They're collecting money for services they know they can't provide." "Let me think about it. I'll call you back." She hung up. I immediately called Rachel. "If we can prove they knowingly misrepresented Clear Path's capabilities, that's fraud," Rachel said. "Real fraud, not just HOA pettiness." "Should I go to the police?" "Not yet. You need more evidence. One witness isn't enough. See if Patricia calls back. See if you can find other former employees or documentation." I spent the next several days digging. I created a fake email account and responded to Clear Path's employment ads, trying to gather information about their operations. I drove past their listed business address, which turned out to be a small warehouse in an industrial park. Through the fence, I could see exactly 2 plow trucks, both old and rusty. Patricia called back on November 24th. "I'll talk," she said, "but I want protection. I can't afford to get sued." "I'll figure something out. Can we meet in person?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Minneapolis. Patricia was a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a cautious demeanor. She brought a folder of documents. "I kept these when I left," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "Schedules, work orders, time sheets. You can see how few properties we actually serviced." I flipped through the pages. The records showed that during the November 8th snowfall, Clear Path had only serviced 23 properties out of 200 in Riverside Meadows. Most of those 23 were on the streets where board members lived. "This is perfect," I said. "This proves everything." "There's more. Daniel told us to falsify the completion reports. He wanted us to mark properties as serviced even when we didn't go there. I refused, and that's when he fired me. Well, he said I quit, but really he pushed me out." "Do you have any documentation of that?" "Text messages." Patricia pulled out her phone and showed me a string of messages from a number she had labeled as Daniel. The messages were damning. Daniel explicitly instructed workers to mark properties as complete even when skipped due to time constraints. He justified it by saying most homeowners wouldn't notice or care. I took photos of everything with Patricia's permission. Then I asked the critical question: did Regina know about this? Patricia nodded slowly. She came to the warehouse once when I was there. Daniel was arguing with another worker about the schedule. Regina told him to just focus on the board members' streets and a few random others to avoid suspicion. She said as long as nobody organized a complaint, they could get away with minimal service. That was it. That was the evidence I needed. I thanked Patricia and promised to keep her updated. Then I called Rachel. "We need a lawyer," I said. "This is bigger than HOA drama. This is fraud, possibly conspiracy." Rachel recommended an attorney named Michael Brennan who specialized in civil litigation. I met with him the following week. Michael was a sharp guy in his 40s who listened intently as I explained the situation and showed him all my documentation. "This is solid," Michael said. "You have evidence of fraud, breach of contract, and misuse of HOA authority. The conflict of interest alone is problematic, but the knowingly false service reporting takes it into criminal territory. What should I do?" "We file a lawsuit against the HOA, Regina personally, and Clear Path. We also report this to the Minnesota Attorney General's office. They handle consumer fraud cases. And honestly, you should consider contacting the local police. Fraud at this scale is a criminal matter." "Will that actually go anywhere? This seems small compared to what police usually deal with. Fraud is fraud. The amount doesn't matter as much as the intent. They were deliberately deceiving people for financial gain. That's a crime." I authorized Michael to proceed with the lawsuit. He filed it on December 3rd. The suit named Regina Vanderbilt, Daniel Vanderbilt, Clear Path Snow Services, and the Riverside Meadows HOA as defendants. We sought refunds for all homeowners, damages for Regina's abuse of authority, and an injunction preventing enforcement of the mandatory service requirement. The lawsuit made local news. A reporter from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune contacted me for an interview. I agreed, and the story ran on December 7th with the headline "HOA President Accused of Funneling Money to Husband's Company." The publicity changed everything. Suddenly, I was getting calls from other homeowners in different subdivisions around Minneapolis. Similar schemes were happening elsewhere. HOAs mandating specific service providers that turned out to be owned by board members or their relatives. In some cases, the services were legitimate but overpriced. In others, like ours, the services were barely being provided at all. The Minnesota Attorney General's office opened an investigation. An investigator named Sarah Chen contacted me on December 10th. "We're looking into Clear Path and several other companies that have these exclusive HOA contracts," Sarah explained. "Your case helped us identify a pattern. We think this is more widespread than anyone realized. What happens now? We gather evidence, interview witnesses, build a case. If we find criminal activity, we refer it to law enforcement for prosecution. Civil penalties are also possible." The investigation moved faster than I expected. By mid-December, the Attorney General's office had interviewed Patricia and several other former Clear Path employees. They had also subpoenaed Clear Path's business records and the HOA's financial documents. Regina fought back desperately. She sent threatening letters to homeowners who had spoken to investigators. She tried to hold an emergency board meeting to remove the other board members who had voted against her. She even attempted to impose a special assessment to fund legal defense, which was so blatantly improper that even her remaining ally on the board, Deanne Kelso, refused to support it. On December 19th, 3 days before Christmas, the Minneapolis Police Department executed a search warrant at Clear Path's warehouse and at Regina and Daniel's home. I watched from my car as police officers carried boxes of documents out of the warehouse. The whole thing felt surreal. That evening, Detective James Morrison called me. "Mr. Olsen, I'm the lead investigator on the Clear Path fraud case. I need to ask you some questions." We met at the police station the next morning. Detective Morrison was a methodical man who took detailed notes as I walked him through everything again. He was particularly interested in Patricia's testimony about Regina's direct involvement in the falsification scheme. "This helps," Detective Morrison said. "We're building a strong case." The financial records show they collected over $70,000 from your HOA alone, but only provided about $15,000 worth of actual service. The rest was pure profit based on fraudulent claims. Will they be charged? That's up to the prosecutor, but based on what we have, I'd say it's likely. This isn't a gray area. They knowingly defrauded people. Christmas came and went quietly. I spent it with Rachel and tried not to think about HOAs or snow removal services, but the case was never far from my mind. On January 3rd, the news broke. Regina and Daniel Vanderbilt were both arrested and charged with theft by fraud, a felony under Minnesota law. Clear Path Snow Services had its business license suspended. The charges alleged that they had defrauded not just Riverside Meadows but 3 other HOAs in the Minneapolis area, collecting over $200,000 while providing minimal services. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Regina as president. Gregory Walsh became interim president. The board also voted to terminate the contract with Clear Path and refund all homeowners the $350 service fee. My fines were voided. Marcus's fines were voided. Jennifer's fines were voided. The HOA even issued a formal apology for the harassment and intimidation tactics Regina had employed. The civil lawsuit continued separately from the criminal case. Michael Brennan negotiated a settlement where the HOA's insurance paid damages to affected homeowners. I received a $2,500 settlement check in late January, compensation for the stress and time I had invested in fighting the scheme. The criminal trial was scheduled for March, but in early February, Daniel and Regina both accepted plea deals. They pleaded guilty to reduced charges of misdemeanor theft and were sentenced to 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service each, and restitution payments to all defrauded homeowners. They also faced a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Minnesota. It wasn't as dramatic as a big trial, but it was justice. They had been caught, punished, and prevented from victimizing others. The Riverside Meadows HOA underwent significant reforms. The board implemented new policies requiring competitive bidding for any service contracts, disclosure of conflicts of interest, and mandatory membership votes for financial obligations exceeding $100. Gregory Walsh proved to be a reasonable president who actually cared about serving homeowners rather than enriching himself. I ran into Regina once more, in late March at a grocery store. She was in the produce section when I turned the corner with my cart. We made eye contact. I saw anger flash across her face, then something that might have been shame. She turned and walked away without saying anything. I didn't chase her. There was nothing left to say. Rachel and I celebrated the resolution with dinner at a nice restaurant in downtown Minneapolis. We toasted to standing up for yourself and not letting petty tyrants get away with corruption. "You know what the crazy thing is," I said. "All of this could have been avoided if she had just run a legitimate service. If Clear Path had actually done the work they promised, if they had bid fairly and disclosed the conflict of interest, it might have been fine. The HOA could have legitimately contracted snow removal if they followed proper procedures. But that would have required integrity," Rachel said. and Regina wanted easy money more than she wanted to do things right. The rest of the winter passed uneventfully. When it snowed, I grabbed my shovel and cleared my driveway myself, just like I always had. Some of my neighbors hired private snow removal services. Others did it themselves. The subdivision looked fine. Property values didn't collapse because we lacked uniform snow removal. Everything Regina had claimed about necessity and standards turned out to be lies covering a simple grift. Spring came early that year. By late April, the last of the snow had melted and crocuses were pushing up through the softening ground. I spent a Saturday afternoon working in my yard, planting flowers along the front walk. Marcus came by with a six-pack of beer, and we sat on my porch talking about everything except HOAs. Life returned to normal. The Riverside Meadows HOA continued to function, but with appropriate oversight and without corruption. I paid my dues, followed reasonable rules, and lived my life. Sometimes I wondered what Regina thought about now, what regrets she carried. She had been the president of a homeowners association, a position of minor authority in the grand scheme of things. It should have been simple. Organize some community events, enforce basic standards, manage the common areas. Instead, she had turned it into a criminal enterprise and destroyed her own life in the process. All for what? Maybe $70,000 in fraudulent profits split with her husband. After legal fees and restitution, they probably ended up worse off than if they had never run the scam at all. And they had criminal records now, community service obligations, probation. They had become pariahs in their own neighborhood. It was a cautionary tale about greed and the abuse of small amounts of power. Regina had convinced herself that her position entitled her to exploit others. She had believed that homeowners wouldn't notice or wouldn't care enough to fight back. She had been wrong on both counts. The experience taught me something important. Standing up to bullies and calling out corruption matters, even in mundane contexts like a suburban HOA. Most people want to avoid conflict. They'll pay unjust fines, accept unreasonable rules, go along with schemes rather than make waves. Regina had counted on that passivity, but I couldn't let it go. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe principle, probably both. I had seen an injustice and decided to fight it, consequences be damned. And in fighting, I had discovered I wasn't alone. Marcus, Jennifer, Patricia, and dozens of others had been willing to stand up once someone took the first step. That was the real lesson. Evil prospers when good people stay silent. Regina's scam had only worked as long as nobody challenged it. The moment people started asking questions, demanding accountability, documenting failures, the whole corrupt scheme collapsed like a house of cards. I thought about writing up the whole experience, maybe posting it online to help others in similar situations. The number of people who had contacted me during the lawsuit, sharing their own HOA horror stories, had been eye-opening. There was clearly a broader problem with accountability in these organizations, but that could wait. For now, I was content to enjoy my beer, my garden, and my properly shoveled driveway. I had stood up to a corrupt HOA president and won. Justice had been served. Life was good. The summer passed peacefully. The HOA organized a 4th of July picnic that was actually enjoyable. Gregory Walsh gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the difficult winter. He didn't mention Regina by name, but everyone knew what he meant. There was a sense of collective relief that the drama was over. I saw Daniel Vanderbilt once more, in August, doing community service picking up trash along the highway. He was wearing an orange safety vest and looked miserable in the summer heat. Our eyes met briefly through my car window as I drove past. I felt a moment of something, pity maybe, but it passed quickly. He had made his choices. In September, I got a call from Sarah Chen at the Attorney General's office. "I wanted to let you know the investigation is officially closed," she said. "We've implemented some policy changes based on what we learned from your case. HOAs now have to file annual financial disclosures with the state. Service contracts over a certain threshold require competitive bidding documentation. Board members have to disclose conflicts of interest in writing." "That's great. Will it actually make a difference?" "Hopefully. It won't stop every bad actor, but it creates accountability. If someone like Regina tries this again, there will be a paper trail. That makes prosecution easier. Thanks for following through on this. Thank you for reporting it. Most people wouldn't have fought this hard." After she hung up, I sat for a while thinking about the ripple effects of one person deciding to push back. New state policies, multiple criminal convictions, reformed HOA practices, hundreds of homeowners getting refunds. It had started with me refusing to accept an unjust letter and deciding to document everything. Rachel moved in with me in October, exactly a year after the mandatory snow service letter had arrived. We joked about the timing as we unpacked her boxes. She had been there for all of it, supporting me through the stress and uncertainty. Now we could move forward together. "Promise me one thing," Rachel said as we collapsed onto the couch after a long day of moving. "What's that?" "If the HOA ever tries anything crazy again, you'll at least consider just paying the fine and moving on." I laughed. "I promise to consider it. That's not promising to do it." "I know." She punched my arm playfully. "You're impossible. You love me anyway, unfortunately." Winter came again, and with it snow. The first storm hit in early November, almost exactly a year after the snowfall I had documented with my security camera. I grabbed my shovel and cleared my driveway, taking a moment to appreciate the simple satisfaction of honest work. No HOA letters appeared at my door. No fines, no threats, no mandatory services. Just snow, a shovel, and a peaceful suburban morning. It was everything I had fought for. Marcus joined me after finishing his own driveway. We stood in the cold, breath steaming, looking at our handiwork. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said. "All that drama, all that stress, and we ended up right back where we started, just clearing our own snow like normal people." "Sometimes you have to fight just to stay in place," I said, "to stop people from taking what you already have." Deep thoughts for a Tuesday morning. I'm a deep guy. You're a stubborn guy. That too. We went inside for coffee and didn't talk about the HOA at all, because that was the best outcome really. An HOA that functioned so smoothly you never had to think about it. No drama, no corruption, no abuse of power. Just neighbors living their lives in peace. The story could have ended there with everything wrapped up neatly. But life rarely works that way. In December, I received a Christmas card from an unexpected source. The envelope had no return address, but the handwriting inside was Regina's. "Mr. Olsen, I know you have no reason to care about my perspective, but I wanted you to know that I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened. I convinced myself I was helping the community, that the money we made was just fair compensation for organizing the service. I see now how wrong I was. I let a small amount of power corrupt me into thinking I was special, entitled to bend rules that applied to everyone else. I destroyed my reputation, hurt my husband, and violated the trust of people who depended on me. You were right to challenge me. I'm sorry for the harassment and stress I caused you. This isn't an excuse, just an acknowledgement that you did the right thing. I hope you have a peaceful holiday. Regina." I showed the card to Rachel. She read it twice, then set it down carefully. "You think she means it?" Rachel asked. I think she means it now. Whether she would have learned anything without getting caught and prosecuted, that's another question. Are you going to respond? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to write back, to acknowledge her apology and offer some kind of closure. But another part of me remembered the threatening letters, the harassment, the deliberate fraud. An apology didn't erase those actions. In the end, I did nothing. I put the card in a drawer and moved on with my life. Maybe that was cold, but Regina's redemption journey was her own problem to work through. I had my own life to live. The new year brought more changes to Riverside Meadows. Gregory Walsh announced he wouldn't seek re-election as HOA president. He had taken the position as an emergency measure and wanted to return to being a regular homeowner. Elections were held in February, and a woman named Patricia Owens won. She was retired, organized, and passionate about transparent governance. The HOA was in good hands. I attended Patricia's first board meeting as president, just to show support. She opened by presenting a revised set of operating procedures that incorporated all the reforms implemented after Regina's removal. She emphasized transparency, accountability, and respect for homeowners' autonomy. "We serve you," Patricia said to the assembled homeowners. "Not the other way around. This board will never forget that." It was exactly what the community needed to hear. As March arrived and the snow finally began to melt for good, I found myself reflecting on the entire experience with a sense of satisfaction. I had fought against corruption and won. I had stood up to intimidation and come out stronger. I had learned that ordinary people have more power than they realize, if they're willing to use it. The driveway that had started this whole mess was clear now, patches of black asphalt showing through the retreating snow. I had shoveled it dozens of times over 2 winters. Every time, I had been grateful for the freedom to handle my own property in my own way. That freedom had been worth fighting for. Rachel and I started planning a summer vacation. We were thinking about driving up the north shore of Lake Superior, maybe camping in the state parks. Normal, peaceful activities that had nothing to do with homeowner associations or snow removal or fraud investigations. Life was good. The neighborhood was healthy. Justice had been served. And every time it snowed, I grabbed my shovel without hesitation, knowing that I had earned the right to clear my own driveway in peace. That simple act had become symbolic of something larger, a reminder that standing up for yourself matters, that holding power accountable makes a difference, and that one person's decision to fight can create change that ripples far beyond their own front yard. The story of HOA corruption in Riverside Meadows became a local legend, referenced in news articles about HOA reform, and cited in discussions about governance accountability. I gave a few interviews to reporters, and even spoke at a city council meeting about the need for stronger oversight of homeowner associations. But mostly, I just lived my life, content in the knowledge that I had made my small corner of the world a little more just. And when the next winter came, bringing with it fresh snow and cold winds, I would be ready. Shovel in hand, security camera rolling if needed, determination unwavering. Because some battles are worth fighting, even if they are just about snow removal in a suburban subdivision in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Sometimes the smallest fights teach the biggest lessons. And sometimes, standing up to a petty tyrant is exactly what's needed to protect everyone else from their abuse. That was my story. That was how I proved the HOA's snow service never showed up, exposed a fraud, got corrupt board members prosecuted, and helped reform an entire system. It started with one letter, one unreasonable demand, and one person's refusal to accept injustice. And it ended with accountability, reform, and the simple freedom to shovel my own driveway in peace.